and welcome back to Macabre Manuscripts. I'm Lorelai, your horror hostess. Today, we're going to be discussing The Shining. But first, we're going to go ahead and start off with some housekeeping. We're getting well on our way into our look through King's works, so I wanted to check in with my audience to see if you all had a preference for where we'd be going once we hit The Gunslinger. The Gunslinger is the first book in Stephen King's Dark Tower series. So my question to you is, how do we want to handle that? Do we want to do the entire series at once, which will take it out of the chronology of how I've been doing the podcast so far, which is just going down the line of King's works as they were published? So should we do the Dark Tower all as one, definitely not one episode, but one after the other, or should I leave it like we've been doing it and go chronologically, and just whenever we get to the next book in the series, that's when we'll discuss that one? Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments, and if nobody says anything, I'll figure it out, I guess. So with that out of the way, let's discuss The Shining. The Goodreads summary for The Shining is: Jack Torrance's new job at the Overlook Hotel is the perfect chance for a fresh start. As the off-season caretaker at the atmospheric old hotel, he'll have plenty of time to spend reconnecting with his family and working on his writing. But as the harsh winter weather sets in, the idyllic location feels ever more remote and more sinister. And the only one to notice the strange and terrible forces gathered around the Overlook is Danny Torrance, a uniquely gifted 5-year-old. The Shining was originally published in 1977. At the time of this episode, it has one movie adaptation and one miniseries adaptation. May I recommend the miniseries adaptation if you would rather watch The Shining than read it? Trigger warnings for The Shining that I picked up, and if I missed others, comments please for people who've never read it and would like warnings. They are going to be racism, ableism, child endangerment, child abuse, alcoholism, spousal abuse, violence, because there's a very violent haunting, death, isolation, wasps, and suicide. So we're going to go ahead now and get started with my summary of The Shining. I'm considering if people would be interested to, somewhere around here, go ahead and put timestamps for if you don't want the end of the book spoiled for you. That being said, not sure about that decision, since you're hopefully going to keep watching after the end of the story, so I might still end up spoiling what happens for you in my thoughts portion of it. But if you have thoughts, let me know what you guys think. Jack Torrance has a problem. At least 2 problems. Jack has anger issues, and Jack is a recovering alcoholic. Despite having a friend in high places, Jack is suspended from his teaching job after assaulting a student who was vandalizing his car. Okay, so that's like 3 problems. 4 problems, though they haven't spoken about it plainly. He knows Wendy's been considering divorce since Jack broke Danny's arm prior to the story beginning. Jack, in order to lay low and hopefully let his friend clear things up with the board of the school so he'll be reinstated, takes a job as the winter caretaker for the Overlook Hotel. With him are his wife Wendy, their son Danny, and Danny's imaginary friend Tony. Tony, who has helped Danny several times with small things like finding missing objects for his parents, this time appears to scare Danny while Danny is waiting for his father to come back from the interview for the Overlook. Tony tells Danny in no uncertain terms, do not go to the Overlook Hotel. Danny then proceeds to remind Tony that he is 5 years old, and that's not how 5-year-olds work. If his parents say he's going, he's going. And Jack gets the job. So he and his family arrive at the Overlook and are given a tour by the manager, Stuart Ullman. Jack is then handed off to the off-season caretaker, Bill Watson, who shows Jack the boiler, warning him that he has to keep it below a certain temperature. It's old and Ullman refuses to have it replaced because it's expensive. Bill also tells Jack about the shadier history of the Overlook, where Ullman had given him a much more sparkling and respectable look at the clientele. Bill proceeds to tell Jack about several less than savory events that occurred in the hotel's history, because it is very old. Once Jack rejoins Ullman and his family, Ullman hands them off to Dick Halloran, a cook at the hotel. Dick and Danny start having a conversation through telepathy, fascinating Danny. After Dick has finished showing the family his part of the hotel, he takes Danny aside. Dick tells Danny this ability they share is something his grandmother called the shining. Dick says he's met very few people with a noticeable shine, and Danny's is the strongest he's ever seen. Then Dick warns Danny that there is something in the hotel, and it's dangerous. He says that Danny should be careful, but that all the things in the hotel can do is scare him. They're not real, and they can't actually touch him. While he'd been showing the family around, Dick had playfully asked Danny if he wouldn't rather come to Florida for Dick's winter job than stay cooped up in the hotel for the winter. Before Dick and Danny rejoin the Torrance family, Dick makes the offer one more time, this time genuinely. Danny, despite Dick's concern and Tony's warnings, says he'll stay with his family at the hotel. Dick tells Danny that if it gets bad, Danny can try to call out to Dick using the shine. He may not hear it all the way in Florida, but he's had Danny hit him with one powerful blast while they talked, and he thinks Danny might manage it if he has to. Dick returns Danny to his parents and heads for Florida. With the hotel now clear of everyone but the Torrance family, things start off fairly normal. Jack does his work as caretaker, spends time with Danny and Wendy, and when he has time, works on writing a play. Wendy cleans and cooks and spends time with Danny when she can. Jack finds a scrapbook of news clippings in the boiler room full of more negative press about the hotel over the years. Danny starts having strange experiences during his explorations around the hotel, but manages to escape the danger. Just as Dick said, while the things Danny sees are scary, they can't seem to actually harm him. There is a time where Danny is outside and playing on the small playground the hotel has on its property. He hears the voice of another child in the tunnel he's crawling through say threatening and scary things to him. When he manages to get out of the tunnel, he finds himself confronted by the topiary animals. I believe the first incident where Danny realizes what Dick told him was no longer true is when Jack gives Danny a wasp nest that Jack had bug bombed and taken down off of the hotel's roof. Jack and Wendy are woken up to Danny screaming and find him being stung and the nest completely covered in very alive and very angry wasps. Jack, as the story progresses, begins to become more and more unstable. He begins to hate the play he is writing and starts becoming agitated with Wendy and Danny very easily. Wendy talks to both Danny and Jack several times about leaving. Jack outright refuses because this place is his job and he does not want to abandon it. In fact, can't afford, in his opinion, to abandon it because he's not sure how many more scrapes his friend Al can get him out of. Danny, knowing that he is the reason the spirits of the hotel are becoming stronger but not wanting to leave his dad alone with them, insists they should stay. The spirits, unable to get control of Danny, instead possess Jack. Jack's behavior becomes more erratic, and he at one point destroys the hotel's CB radio and snowmobile, the only two links to the outside world once the snow has cut them off from the town below. Danny one night finds himself outside of room 217, where Dick told him to stay out of specifically. Instead, Danny goes in. He is attacked by the spirit of a woman who died in the bathtub in that room who strangles him. Danny barely manages to escape. Wendy, upon seeing marks on her son's neck, immediately assumes Jack did it. Danny is almost catatonic until he sees his father and then runs to him saying she did it, leading Jack to believe it was Wendy who strangled Danny. Jack walks away and finds himself in the hotel ballroom. But he's not alone. There's an entire party going on, and the bar, which was cleared of alcohol when the hotel was shut down for winter, is now fully stocked and with a bartender waiting to serve. While Jack drinks, he is joined by the ghost of a previous off-season caretaker, Delbert Grady, who murdered his own family during his employment at the Overlook. Delbert tells Jack that management is displeased with his performance. If he can't keep his family in check, how is he supposed to take care of the hotel? Grady lets Jack know that Wendy and Danny need correcting if Jack wants to be taken seriously. Jack says he's going to do just that. If my memory serves me correctly, I believe this is the first time that Wendy experiences anything in the hotel because she and Danny can both hear the sounds of the party going on from the caretaker's quarters, which Wendy locked to keep Jack out of. The next afternoon, Jack confronts Wendy as she tries to get food in the kitchen. He attempts to strangle her, but she grabs a bottle and manages to knock Jack unconscious long enough for Wendy and Danny to drag Jack to the walk-in pantry and lock him inside. Wendy and Danny try to figure out what to do for a few hours while Jack is locked in the pantry. He is eventually let out by the ghost of Delbert Grady, but only after Jack swears he's going to kill Wendy and bring Danny to us, presumably the entities of the hotel. Jack goes and gets a roque mallet. Roque is a game similar to croquet, and goes looking for his family. Finding the CB broken and the snowmobile disabled, Wendy has spent time while Jack was locked up trying to figure out a way out, while also letting Danny, who told his parents about his powers to explain the marks the woman from 217 had caused, try to call out to Dick in hopes he can come help them. We see a point of view from Dick as he rushes back to Colorado from Florida as quickly as he can, being helped in his mission to reach the hotel by people who all have the shining. Jack finds and attacks Wendy again, seriously injuring her. Wendy stabs Jack, but he is so far gone it barely manages to slow him down. Wendy locks herself in the bathroom of the caretaker's suite, and when Jack knocks a hole in the door and tries to reach in, she cuts his hand with a razor before passing out from her injuries. Jack then goes on the hunt for Danny, seeing that Wendy is now off of the board for assistance, at least for the moment. As Jack makes it back to the front entryway of the hotel where he had his standoff with Wendy, he hears a snowmobile pulling up and hides. Dick comes in, having survived a confrontation with the now very alive and very aggressive topiary animals, and follows Wendy's blood to the caretaker's apartment where Jack attacks Dick with the mallet, then leaves him for dead so that he can return to his mission to find Danny. Danny has been hiding, knowing how his father's acting, and finally manages to get in contact with Tony again, who tells him that Danny will remember what his father forgot. Danny also realizes that Tony is an older version of himself, Daniel Anthony Torrance. When Jack finds him, Danny stands against the thing that is no longer his father. Jack manages a moment of clarity, tells Danny that he loves him, and that Danny needs to get away before the hotel takes him over again. Before the hotel, now in full possession of Jack Torrance, has a chance to kill Danny, he reminds the hotel of what it forgot and what his father forgot. Jack, distracted by his mission and also detained by Wendy at one point, hadn't dumped the boiler in far too long. Jack rushes off to correct this error. Wendy finds Dick once she has regained consciousness. Dick is not dead, and Wendy manages to wake him up from his stupor. They rush to find Danny, who tells them they have to leave the hotel immediately. The trio makes it onto the porch, then are launched into the snow by the force of the explosion from the ancient boiler. The hotel goes up in flames. Before they all hop on Dick's snowmobile and leave, they make a quick stop at the shed for blankets because Wendy and Danny aren't dressed for sub-zero temperatures outside and would freeze before they made it back to town. Dick is almost possessed by the lingering spirit of the hotel, but resists and the trio escapes down the mountain. We get a prologue of Danny and Wendy staying at a new resort Dick is working at as his guests. He fishes and discusses some things with Danny before they are joined by Wendy, and the three sit together and enjoy being alive. So, that is a quick summary of The Shining. Now we'll move to my thoughts. So, The Shining is one of my favorite King books. It's both heavily supernatural and human in its horror. You can and should fear the ghosts roaming the halls. but you can't forget the danger that brought you there to begin with. I think in the beginning, Jack has good intentions. I think he means well. I think he wants this job so that he can save his family because he knows Wendy is looking for a divorce, or at least contemplating it. They just haven't ever gone about having a conversation. I think he really believes if they go do this, he'll be able to clear his head and get his play written so that maybe even if Al doesn't get him his job back, he will be able to have money. He will make money off of his play. At this point in the book, seems determined to stay sober. He's at this point been sober about 5 months before the start of the book. But in his point of views, we see Jack has a hard time, even while sober, of taking accountability. In the beginning, when we are in Jack's head around the time he's doing his interview and we're getting kind of an info dump on us, we see that Jack had to kick a student off the school debate team because the student couldn't make his point in time due to a stutter. And he kept getting pulled off by the time clock and he just couldn't do it. That student accused Jack of speeding up the time clock. Jack, in his inner monologue, tells us that he didn't. Jack finds the student slashing his tires. He beats him up badly, leading to Jack being suspended from work. It's bad. I'm not going to get all graphic about it. At this point, I believe Jack was also sober, so this wasn't an issue of his alcoholism. He just also has really serious anger issues on top of being an alcoholic, which he, I think at this point, had already been trying to get under control. But it doesn't help anything if you can just be that angry. Later on, when Jack is once again thinking about the student and the situation, we see in Jack's head that he admits he did change the time clock. He did speed it up, I believe, about a minute to intentionally kick this boy off of the debate team because of his stutter, because he didn't want the boy embarrassing himself. So even in admitting he did what the student had accused him of, Jack feels justified. I think the only thing Jack never tries to justify is the incident where he broke Danny's arm. And while he doesn't try to justify injuring Danny, he does just blame it on the alcohol. And then continued to drink, despite him admitting it makes him a danger to his child. He finally stops at some point before our story begins, but also not right after, snapping his son's arm. Something else, I believe it was an incident with Al driving in a car with him, and they ran over a bike that ended up not being attended, but they spent at least a good hour trying to find a body to go with this bike that was just in the road. And they never did. So we're pretty sure, from everything we know, it was just a bike abandoned in a weird place. But if I remember correctly, that may have been the trigger. It may have also been something else. This is what I get for taking so long to start this podcast. Channel, whatever. I lost my exact timing stuff. That part at least will get somewhat better, even though I'm not going to lie to you guys. I'm going to hit the main points of The Stand. The Stand is 47 hours long as an audiobook. I'm not going to go into the minutia of The Stand if I can help it. It's so long, and there's so much that's going on. I'm going to try to just hit the high points and work from there. We also see that Jack is angry just in general, just with the world. Despite his shortcomings, he thinks he should be so much better off than he is. Despite his alcoholism, despite another mistake that he made that I don't think we actually find out about until Doctor Sleep, and we'll get to that, but that one's definitely a good distance away from where we are. But Jack seems to think he just deserves more, despite the choices he's made, and despite the fact that the only reason he had any job by the time we started the story was his friend Al Shockley, who also enabled his alcoholism. So that's a whole other issue. But Al's rich. Jack is not. I'm not saying it's fair. I am saying that Jack apparently just expecting and being angry that things keep going wrong for him, especially when he's doing wrong, is baffling to me. Because he admits to screwing that boy over, that student over. He admits to speeding up the time clock so that the guy can't be on the debate team. So now I don't feel sorry that he got fired. Because it's not like a kid, it's like a teenager. And I'm not saying you should beat up a teenager who's slashing your tires. I am saying if you are a teenager, don't get caught slashing your teacher's tires. Just don't do it in the first place. Just don't do it in the first place. But don't get caught. Don't be doing it when it's very likely that he might come outside and catch you doing it. That's all I'm saying. Wendy Torrance is a woman who's gone through a lot. She, as have other protagonist women, had an overbearing and harsh mother. You know what I'm going to say. You'll hear about it on the podcast. On top of having a difficult childhood, and Jack also had a difficult childhood, but that doesn't excuse his behavior towards anybody as an adult. But he married Wendy, and she's been having to deal with all of the issues that have come along with his alcoholism for at least 5 years, because Danny is 5. I don't remember if we find how long they were together before Danny was born, but Danny. So at least 5 years. I was disappointed to find on the Stephen King wiki, which I use for reference when I need to refresh my memory on something, that she is described, that the novel version of Wendy is described as miserable and depressed. That is not something that I have ever gotten from the book version of Wendy. She's stressed out. She's concerned. Her husband got fired for beating the crap out of a student, and he broke his son's arm. That was, I think, when Danny was 2 or 3, so it's been a little while. But still, he's done other things out of anger since then, just not anything, I believe, physically abusive to Wendy or Danny. Physically. Other kinds of abuse, I think, was a different story. There's also something in there about holding things Jack has done over his head. I don't think it's fair to say it like that, on the grounds that Jack, when the book opens, Jack has only been sober 5 months. After years of dealing with Jack and putting up with his alcoholism, I don't think it's fair to say that she's holding things over Jack's head when he hasn't been trying to fully change for very long. He's been sober for 5 months, and that's great. And I, again, at the beginning of the story, fully believe he was trying. I think he wanted things to work. I think he wanted to save his marriage with Wendy. I think Jack was really trying at the beginning, but still, it had only been 5 months. That's not holding things over somebody's head. That's not being cruel. It feels like what should be kind of a less biased summary, I guess is the best way to put it. Wikipedia or wiki things or stuff like that, we usually expect more of a non-biased discuss, just like a flat summary, not a this or that about the person. And I don't remember King in the book ever describing Wendy as depressed or miserable from her point of view. And I can't account for Jack's, but I don't think Jack's point of view should be one we're using in an unbiased article that is supposed to be discussing the character of Wendy Torrance. If you're going by what Jack says, everybody but him sucks. And I just don't think that's true. Anyway, I didn't mean to go on like a whole rant about that. There's that, and then I'm going to have another thing in the stand I want to discuss about the wiki, and I'm going to try to not make that as long. But my point is, I don't think it's unreasonable after years of abuse and only 5 months clean that Wendy isn't just automatically trusting Jack. Because I don't even think this is the first time he's tried to get sober in the 5 years or in his life or whenever. I don't think this is the first time he's told her that. I could be wrong. This may be the first time that he's been like, okay, now I'm getting sober. But I think it makes sense that Wendy's a little afraid to leave Danny alone with him and that she doesn't necessarily trust him. Because if he can't hold his temper at work, what is he going to do at home? If he's going to do that much damage to another kid that's not his, and if he has broken his own son's arm before, I don't know. I wouldn't trust him. Wendy's considering leaving him, but hasn't yet. I think she really loves him. I don't think she wants to leave him. But she's been put in a position where she's really having to consider it as an option, and she's not happy. But she's also not just this miserable, sad woman who's just, flouncing around, upset, and just making it everybody's problem. Wendy, as a character, is such a strong person. And it bothers me that she has more than just in the wiki, Stephen King wiki article about her, has been represented as this kind of weak-willed, small woman who just finally in the end she stands up for Danny and tries to do something once Jack is possessed, but before that she's just been woe is meing around for her whole life, and that's not true. At least not from my reading of the book. I guess other people can come out with different readings. I don't see it. I don't see her being weak. I don't see her being just miserable and depressed. I see a woman who has been put in a very difficult position, who hasn't quite made a decision yet because she wants to believe going to the hotel is going to not completely fix things, but be a good start, because Jack will have to stay sober. There's not supposed to be alcohol out there. There won't be a bunch of city distractions. There won't be life happening. He won't have to worry about other people for a while. She is a woman on the edge who is holding on to this fragile string of hope because she doesn't want her family to fall apart. So calling her weak just seems cruel. And I've said all that. And I love Wendy as a character. I love Jack as a character, even though if Jack was a real person, I would hate him as a person. But I'm also not coming on here and saying Wendy's perfect. I personally, again, don't have kids. I wouldn't think it was a good idea to take a 5-year-old to a mountain alone for months when you'll be cut off from the world. And not just because of Jack, not even just because of Jack. Assume Jack is a perfect person, a perfect man, and this is just them wanting to go let him work on his play for the winter. Let's pretend for a second that Jack hasn't done the things that Jack has done, and that that's not my issue. Kids are so uncoordinated and so dumb sometimes. Like, not dumb. They don't know how the world works. They barely know how their body physics work yet. There are so many stairs. I think the Overlook Hotel is like 3 stories. There are so many stairs for him to fall down. There is so much old stuff that could just break and hurt him because he doesn't know better and tries to play on it. There are so many things that could go wrong. I don't understand why Danny went. I don't necessarily understand why Wendy went and didn't just stay somewhere with Danny and have Jack's checks shipped to them like I know a lot of other jobs can do over the summer, or sorry, over the winter, and then see how things were when Jack got back, see where they were at, give both of them some time to think, some space apart. I don't know why that's not an option that they went with. I guess Wendy thought it would help. All of them being together up there for the winter. She wanted to trust Jack. She wanted to believe that this would be the opportunity that got their family and their life back on track. Speaking of Danny, Danny Torrance is the quintessential example of a kid who just had to grow up too fast. He doesn't just know about his parents' issues from the outside. Sometimes he just accidentally uses his shine to look inside. It's not on purpose. Most of the time, I don't think it's on purpose. I think he did it a couple of times on purpose. But doing that, he knows his mother's considering divorce, and all he knows about divorce is this ominous, like, playground rumor of divorce that he has because another kid from his preschool or kindergarten or whatever age that would be, his parents got divorced and that kid left, so then all of the other little kids started making up little stories because that's what you do. You make up stories and rumors about, you know, what happened to the kid or all that kind of stuff. So Danny was scared of divorce, and Danny loves his dad so much. That's one of the things I forgot to say about Wendy. Wendy gets, a couple of times, gets very jealous of Danny and Jack's relationship because Danny worships his father. Danny loves his father so much. And Wendy just, even though it's not true, Wendy feels like she doesn't have that same emotion from Danny. She doesn't feel like she has that same, that Danny doesn't feel the same way about her, but he does. Danny also loves his mother so much. He's 5. and he's with his mom all day. So he's a little more excited to spend time with his dad when his dad's home. He's a little more excited to see his dad when he gets home. He's 5. But like I said, Wendy's not perfect. There are times when she seems like she's trying to make Danny's love a competition, or that she feels like Danny's love is a competition and she's losing. And that's not good. That makes me feel for her just like the other stuff does. But that was something that she needed to work on, and it doesn't seem like she was. She was just accepting it and being upset about it. But anyway, back to Danny. Danny tries so hard. He always goes out of his way to be helpful and be polite and just whatever his parents need. He's always trying to help. He's always trying to be there. But the flip side of that is that this little boy, this 5-year-old boy, is trying so hard not to be a burden that he basically will just pretend he has no needs. Sure, his mom knows he needs to eat. His mom knows he needs food and all that stuff. But emotionally, Danny just tries to make himself so small because he doesn't want to be the reason anything bad happens. He doesn't want to be the reason for drama. He doesn't want to be a reason his parents fight. So he just tries to be just such this happy and adjusted kid that he's not. That kid needs help. And it's fine that he needs help, but he did. But he was at 5 years old just trying to be this go with the flow person and not have concerns outwardly or express his concerns to his parents, because that's him being a burden to his parents, and he so doesn't want to do that because he's afraid he'll be the stick that breaks his parents' marriage or makes them hate him or whatever else. It's a lot. Even with his power, and it's, to be fair, before the Overlook, it's a fairly limited thing. I remember he uses it to find a trunk that Jack thinks he lost, but he actually just like shoved under the stairs of the basement in their house. So it wasn't that he'd lost it, it was just in a place that he hadn't looked and didn't think that there was anything. And besides like here and there finding stuff for his parents, helping his parents or himself sometimes or his friends. Besides that, Danny just really uses the power to talk to Tony. And that's more on Tony's time as far as I'm aware. Like, Danny can try. And sometimes Tony shows up. But then sometimes Tony just shows up whether Danny likes it or not. Up until Danny meets Dick Halloran, he has absolutely no idea what his power is or what it can do. Besides the little tricks. And besides talking to Tony. He doesn't know what's going on. Because he's 5. And I think that can bring us to Dick Halloran. One of my favorite things about Dick Halloran is that he doesn't ever talk down to Danny. Even the first time they meet, even the first time he's trying to explain the stuff about the hotel and all of that, he doesn't talk down to Danny. He doesn't treat Danny like he's stupid. He treats Danny like Danny is his equal, but he does try to soften it as much as he can and not scare Danny too badly because Danny is 5. And he understands that both that Danny is smart enough to understand, but also that Danny is 5. And so if he just freaks him out, that's not going to accomplish anything. I wish we had more time with Dick. I just love him as a character. He is such a warm, protective presence. And he, even when we see him in Florida, I don't think that man has really a single enemy in the world. I know he and Ullman kind of butt heads, like the hotel manager Ullman kind of butt heads, but I don't think outside of the very unfortunate general the racism. I don't know why I'm trying to sugarcoat it. 19 there was a lot of racism in the 1970s. I'm sure Dick experienced a lot of racism. I don't think we really see it in the book, besides with Jax being a fucking asshole and calling him the N-word several times once the hotel possesses him, which is fucked up. But I don't like on a personal level, I don't think anybody who knows Dick doesn't hate Dick. I don't think you can. I think he is just so bright and he's such a bright presence that you can't. He is one of the clearest, I think is the best word I can put in there, agents of the white that we get in one of King's books, because I don't think Dick Halloran has a malicious bone in his body. He gets sassy sometimes, but he's not malicious and he's not cruel even to the people he doesn't like. I think that Dick, and I don't know whether if it's intended or not, but this is how I feel. I feel like Dick in the novel is Jack's antithesis. He is the antithesis of this man who is just so angry and who seems to have such a hard time finding good things about his life or about other people. He's just so angry and resentful. And Dick is the opposite. Dick is just so strong and caring and just an overall good person. I think the best proof we have in this novel of Dick being an agent of the white, of good, of the good team is that there are suddenly, after Dick has told us earlier on in the novel that he's met maybe 2 or 3 people in his whole life that shined a noticeable amount, that there were suddenly, conveniently, several people with a strong shine who get him to the Overlook to help Danny and Wendy before it's too late. Now you're going to want to buckle in a little bit because we're going to talk about the hotel. The Overlook Hotel is the antagonist, the main overarching antagonist of The Shining. It is one of King's evil places. It is dark, it is possessed. It has been so saturated with the things that have happened there that it is just a beacon now, and it draws these negative people, negative entities, negative experiences, but it's all covered up. The Overlook has been fully shut down, I think, twice prior to the Torrances staying, like not just shutting down for the winter, completely closed because of things that happened there. Been closed at least twice. It's changed owners multiple times, at least on paper. I think we find out that there's a kind of shell company thing going on where the last guy who was supposed to have sold it after it had to be fully shut down still owns it because he's on the board or owns the company. that owns the Overlook. Something like that. Prior to Jack, I mentioned the other caretaker, Delbert Grady. He killed his wife and 2 daughters in the hotel and then himself while he was supposed to be watching it for the winter. There was a mob-related shooting where a pretty high-ranking mobster and at least one of his bodyguards was killed. And a woman, the woman in 217, committed suicide after the bellboy who she had been having an affair with behind the back of her rich husband stole her Porsche and drove off. She came down, got very drunk in the bar room of the hotel, and then was not seen again until somebody found her no longer alive. But all of this negative press just seemed to disappear, go away. Because that's what the hotel needs. That's what the evil places need, and it's what the evil places can do. There is always someone who wants to protect these places. Now, whether they fail or not, separate issue. But these places will always find somebody who wants them to keep going and who wants them to thrive. They might not know why. They almost certainly don't know why. But bad things about these places will just go away, go unmentioned, go like they never happened. So we know that Dick also has the Shining, but not nearly as strong as Danny's, which is why we're given to understand that when Dick is walking around the hotel and he spends the whole summer season at the hotel working, it's like comparing a candle flame to the sun. There are ghosts. He sees things. He occasionally interacts with things, but it's not ever to the level it gets with Danny when Danny is in the hotel. There are ghosts and possibly some malevolent force behind the ghosts as well. But to the average person with no shine or a minor shine that's barely more than an intuition, you probably experience little or nothing being at the Overlook, assuming you're not on the wrong side of a mob boss or something like that. There is an evil force that lays dormant inside the Overlook until Danny arrives. And he is probably not the first. It's speculation here on my part, but my guess would be that either the previous caretaker, Delbert Grady, his wife, or one of or both of his daughters had a stronger shine, probably still not to Danny's level, but to enough of a level that the hotel was able to take control of Delbert Grady and get him to attack and kill his family and then himself. Or maybe he killed himself out of guilt once he snapped out of it. I'm not sure. We don't get anything really from his perspective. Anyway, the Overlook Hotel is evil. It's also hungry. It wanted Danny because Danny would make it stronger and allow its malevolence to shine. The Overlook Hotel won't be the last thing we see in Stephen King's multiverse that feeds on people shining. The Shining is probably one of my favorite King books. I'm a sucker for a good ghost story, and it's one of his best, if not one of the best I've ever read. There's not really a lot of need, in my opinion, to discuss the town on this one, since it is very minorly discussed at all as we're going along. So, it's the bad is at the Overlook. It does not touch the town. The town is not affected by it. The Shining, in the way of connections to the Stephen King multiverse, The Shining has a strong but hardly unique connection there. The Shining becomes a very central piece in the Dark Tower series, and we will see it used in many different ways in his other stories as we're going along. So I will make sure to touch on that when it happens. But in general, we don't see too much in the way of the hotel because it's more of a location than an entity or a spirit, so we don't see it come back really in any real instances of the Dark Tower, not on its own either way. I will say that people come to it. We will see the Overlook Hotel again, but the Shining novel is the first place we see the ability called the Shining, and where it's first called that. The ability is part of the Tower story. It's super relevant, and we'll get there when we get there. The Shining in other tales, I'd probably even argue that we've seen The Shining before. Carrie White's ability in Carrie, obviously. Carrie White's telekinesis fits into a category of the Shine. There's nothing that says that the power has to be used for good or that it has to be used for the white. So there's no reason that Carrie couldn't have done what Carrie did and still be considered as having the Shining. I think that about covers everything I wanted to deal with for the Shining novel, so let's go ahead and talk about a non-King book I've read. So a little while ago, I got a bunch of ebooks, and one of them was called Mexican Gothic. I was very excited to read it. I had been anticipating it. Since I'd gotten several ebooks, I waited for that to not be the first one I read because I was so excited, and I'd been hearing such good things about it on TikTok. And then I read it, and I wish I had better things to say about it. Genuinely. I had also recently read another very similar story, so I figured out the twist pretty early on. That might be something that affected my enjoyment of Mexican Gothic that wouldn't affect yours or hasn't affected yours if you read it already. It might be that I hit a very poorly stacked situation of reading two similar stories with similar twists, one right after the other, which is, I guess, kind of a danger if you're reading enough haunted house stories. There's an opportunity for overlap. And the one that I'd read prior to that was also about a haunted house. I will spoil to the point that the house was not haunted. It was not ghosts, it was not spirits for either of the books. But yeah, I don't want to spend a ton of time on it because I read it so long ago I don't remember it that well anymore. I will say it was another time, it was another time in similarly to in The Shining when I was saying I don't understand why Jack and Wendy would take Danny up to the Overlook with them. In the time period that this story is based in, I don't understand why they would not have sent the main character's father, instead of her to try to deal with the situation that was occurring, because they were worried about the main character's cousin who had gone off and married a man, specifically a white man, and they were a Hispanic or Latinx family. The main character got a strange letter from her, and they were worried. and the father just let his daughter go to this strange house. I just don't, for, again, and this wasn't like modern day either, really. I think it was, I don't remember, I just know it wasn't written for modern day. I don't see why, if you're going to go deal with somebody's husband, like the point is they were trying to talk to the cousin and see if they needed to get the cousin out of there. If it turned out B was true, if it turned out we need to get the cousin out of there, it's sexist, but part of the story was that at the time a lot of things were sexist. Things are still sexist now, but we're not going to get into that. Um, why are you sending a woman when the chances of her cousin's husband respecting her and being like, okay, fine, you guys can leave, that's fine, cool, are slim to none, versus the possibility that the man might listen if the main character's father had gone instead, who had raised the cousin. I just, I don't get it. I think that really took me out of the story, just even to begin with, because it was, to to me, and if you don't agree with me, that's great. Again, I heard a lot of good things about this book. I just don't agree. And I just, it felt like, it felt a little bit, honestly, like lazy writing that the father would let his daughter go at all, because that's putting his child in danger. Not that he didn't love the cousin, because he raised the cousin. Not that he didn't care about the cousin. But I would think he would care enough about his daughter that he wouldn't send her out to deal with this situation. No matter, I think the issue was she was a little bit of a brat. No matter how much of a brat she was, I wouldn't think he would send his daughter into potential danger to deal with a situation that she can't even deal with. Not because she doesn't want to, not because she's incapable, but because the society at the time makes it extremely difficult for her to get the job done that he's trying to send her to do. Like I said, I think that book, and I'm trying not to super spoil the non-King books that I tell you guys about, so I won't get into it really anymore. But so with that said, I think we are at the end of this episode of Macabre Manuscripts. I am so glad you guys are here. Thank you if you made it to the end. I appreciate you. If you enjoyed this, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. I have a TikTok now under the same name. If you want to go follow that, that would be cool. It's mostly going to be clips from this, so you don't have to, but also, I'd love to get more traffic. I will see you guys next time when we will be discussing either Night Shift or The Stand, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be Night Shift. So, I looked up King's books in chronological order, right? And that, I thought I had it down. Then I found another list that puts the short story collections in there directly with his actual novels. And that shows that Night Shift is before The Stand. And I'm not going to get into it with that. At any rate, I think it's probably close enough together that I won't feel like it's disturbing the chronology too much to do one or the other. But The Stand is 47 hours long on audiobook, I think. 45 or 47 hours long. And I'm trying. Guys, I am slogging through The Stand. I am almost there. I will have a Stand episode, at least one. I'm gonna try not to make it multiple episodes because I don't dislike The Stand, but I also don't know that I want to talk that much about The Stand. Anyway, I'm rambling now. Next episode will either be what will probably be a part one of either The Stand or Stephen King's first release short story collection, which was Night Shift. So I hope you guys will come back for that. I look forward to talking to everybody again. And stay safe and stay spooky. Let me guys know your thoughts